Ladies and gentlemen, admit it. You love chaos. That's why you love the How to Lose a Chess playlist, because it's generally people with 3-digit or 2-digit, that's impossible, but they play like it, elos, going up against one another in a battle of who will be the person with one eye leading the blind. But in this video, as we will be covering a game with many blunders, it's actually a game of two very decent players. Somebody submitted this game to me on my stream, and I said that I would make a game out of it. The video is called Checkmate In because, well, you'll find out. So our protagonist in this game hails from Ireland and is playing with the black pieces. Big Shaq, the one and only, man's not hot. If you know, you know. If you don't know, now you know. Opponent is named Neil C. C stands for Chad. No, it doesn't. Stands for his last name, which I've blurred out. They are both honorary grandmasters. It's a matchup of Ireland versus the UK, which I'm also sure has some pretty deep-rooted political beef, but, you know, that's where they're from. So the players are 1500. White begins the game with e4. And as crazy and chaotic and silly as this game is, there's actually a lot to learn. So black plays the move g6, going for a modern defense, and white plays e5. So this is already an example of the fact that even at the 1500 level, people have absolutely no idea how to play openings. Neil, I think you're a very nice guy, but e5 is an awful move. You're really not supposed to march your center pawns when the opponent doesn't have anything moved yet. Like, if this was the position, this would be different, because at least these pawns are more locked. You see the eval almost goes to +1. But when you play e5, black can so quickly target this. And if you try to hang on to it, black can so quickly target this pawn too with the move c5. Like, white's position will fall apart so quickly. You think that white can defend, but then you have takes. You have takes. You know, and slowly but surely, these pawns will just run out of the ability to defend themselves, because your knight will then get pinned to your queen. Two pawns cannot stand against an enemy kind of line of attack. But already we have nonsense, because b6. I mean, what is b6? What are we even do? What is b6? Why? Why are we playing a double fianchetto? I mean, if you're going to play the modern, you've got to activate this bishop quite quickly. You've got to play d6, c5. The double fianchettos work against queen's pawn openings. So you can play a double fianchetto. Oop, that's not a good move. You can play a double fianchetto against the queen's pawn opening, but even then, if you give white all the center space, you're probably just going to have a bad time, right? So white plays knight f3, bishop b7. Now, I mean, this is not a good move, but practically speaking, d5, and black is already suffocating. Like, this is a totally different story. Because now if you try to break out with moves like e6, for example, here comes c4, and if you do this wrong, like if you mess up in trying to break out of this position, white will suddenly play e6, and this pawn is way too close to your king. And it's cutting all the circulation. It's a kidney stone, all right? If there's anybody watching this video who for some reason has passed one or had one in the past, like, you know it's not good. It's not good. But in general, to play behind a space advantage, you need to be aggressive. Knight c3, bishop c4, bishop f4. White's next move is very bad. This is just too passive of a move. And yes, at the low level, I'm talking, like, I would have never criticized this if this was a 700 move, but you have to be a little bit more active. I mean, you have more space. You have to play behind your space advantage, right? Like in basketball, if you have an advantage, right, like you're pushing the pace, I mean, you're passing the ball around, why is one guy standing in the back, like all the way by your own hoop? Get everybody involved. Black now plays d6, and white sacks the pawn. That is gangster. That is an amazing move. It's Stockfish's top choice. And the point is, and this is why you should be careful when you allow center pawns to overwhelm you. Now, if you take on e6, knight g5 is just a crushing move. And you might say, Levy, well, on move 3, you said d6. What's the difference? Well, the difference is the bishop takes. And in this case, the pawn could also take, but if you don't damage your structure, that's just a free pawn. This is a very common sacrifice of a pawn, particularly against fianchetto setups like bishop g7, because these light squares are super weak. Knight g5 here is demolishing the black position. Like, for example, if you try to defend this pawn with the queen, White's next move is bishop g4, and black has no more defense. Bishop d5 is one final move. The knight hits the bishop, and that's it. Because now this is falling, and this doesn't even guard the bishop. So an example of how bad this can get, how quickly, and how badly it can get, like knight e6 hits the bishop, and it also threatens a discovered check to the queen. So even if the bishop moves, like, you know, you defend it, knight g5 wins the queen. So this is a super, super common sacrifice when the light squared bishop of black can no longer defend this pawn. And white follows up this sacrifice with a completely bozo move, putting the wrong piece on that square. I mean, what? Like, what? This is such a natural move. Like, what? What is bishop g5? What does that even begin to do? Now black's like, all right, knight d7. I mean, I don't even like knight d7. Like, why are we not just trying to castle? But black does that in a moment, does play knight f6. Now this pawn is still very weak, but you can't eat your own bishop. So what do? I mean, you should probably bring a rook to the party. You should, and see, now white wishes they have a bishop here. Because why is the bishop on e2? Right? The bishop should have been more active. The bishop's in the way of everything. So white should have had the bishop more active in the first place. A lot of people, even at the 1500 level, they just don't think what they want 5 moves later. I mean, I know that's like a really annoying interview question. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? I don't know. Does anyone know nowadays? So, you know, yeah, I mean, it's just, you got to think about where you're going to want your pieces. And, yeah, h3 is just not it. I mean, what does that even, why? There was a famous anecdote by a Russian author actually, I don't remember if it was him or his coach, but he said that when he was younger, I think it was, maybe I'm misremembering, I don't know. But I remember I had a book once, and he said that his coach used to make him pay him a fee anytime he played one of these moves, just a lazy move. He would pay like 5 rubles or whatever. So c5, yeah, black plays a nice idea. Now, black, of course, should castle. Like, let's not reinvent the wheel. I mean, you just castle here, you move the knight to the middle, the open f-file, great position. Black plays c5, okay? c3, queen c7, and castles long. Now, black told me when I analyzed this game on stream that they were worried about castling short because they thought their king was open. That's what they said. That is what Big Shaq said. Big Shaq said, I didn't castle short because I felt like my king had openings near him and, you know, bishop c4 and blah, blah, blah. So here's what I'm going to say. The more you can avoid verbal conclusions in chess, the better. Now, what does that mean? Verbal is, my king's weak. What does that even mean? I need a tangible, concrete reason why short castles is bad. There has to be a move, a forced sequence of moves that wins something for white. Otherwise, there's nothing, and you're just going to go knight e4, use the rook, use the knight, and you're totally fine. You're going to use the open f-file to create an attack on your opponent. And that's the truth. Short castles is one of the best moves in this position. In trying to protect his king, Big Shaq actually imbalances the position beyond belief. Think about that. He didn't castle short because he thought his king was weak, so he played opposite side castling. Folks, when you castle opposite sides, it's a declaration of war in chess, okay? Like, you're basically saying that you can throw all the pawns now at each other. I mean, like, white had no attack, and now white doesn't have to be a genius. White should just go a4. That's all white needs to do. And then white needs to play a5, and like white actually has an attack. Look how quickly the evaluation is suddenly in white's favor. So folks sometimes evaluate things in a verbal way, not in a chess way. Here, white plays this move. This is not a bad move because the rook is attacking the pawn. But by the way, you see the bishop move the second time? It should have already been more active. Black plays a6, attacking the bishop. The bishop goes to d3. And now it's anybody's game. I mean, it's honestly a very complicated position. This pawn is under attack. You could move it forward. I wouldn't defend it because I would avoid putting a bishop in the center like this. First of all, because of c4, and second of all, well, I mean, it's just defending this pawn. So we can't forget about that. So there's a lot of complicated things. Black here chooses to attack the bishop. The bishop moves all the way back to f1. And now black attacks the other bishop because black doesn't really know exactly what to do. Black can't really move because black put themselves in a very difficult situation with this opposite side castling business. Now we have bishop f6, takes, and rook takes e6. So now white is no longer even down material. Now, folks, if I were to ask you in this position, what is the best move? It's not a tactic. This is a very high-level intermediate chess battle. What is the best move here for black from a positional understanding standpoint? Like following the game plan, all right? You should pause if you want to find it. It's not a tactic. It's just understanding what the game plan here is. It's minus 0.9, but only because of one move. All right, you can pause. I'll take a sip of my iced latte. Yeah, the move is g5. You say, what does that do? It creates an attack. That's the idea. All right? In a perfect world, if we give, black several more moves, black will go g4, the queen is active and the rook is active, and black has a, devastating attack. And can deliver mate quite shortly. But you have to understand, when your opponent makes a move, all right, a move has been made. This is what I told the person who played black in this game on stream. I said, hit the pause button and go, okay, what did this do? They took a pawn. Do they have any threats? Do they have any checks? No. Do they have any captures? Yes, but they all lose material, right? Because this is all defended. Do they have any attacks? Number 3, do they have any attacks? No. Can they have any attacks? Yeah, probably. They can probably attack this in a move. So it's now my time to do something. So one option is to kick the rook out completely. I actually don't dislike this move at all, but it's a simple move. The rook will just retreat, right? In many cases, a rook stuck in your territory like this could get trapped. You can sack something and then trap it. But really, you castled opposite sides. You have to create an attack. You castled on opposite sides. You have to attack. Black actually plays a move which now gives white b3 and actually a4, because this is just a clear indication that black doesn't understand the position. Now white is going to play a4, and in a couple of moves, if you play g5, it's a totally different story, because takes, knight a3, right? And then b3. Oh, b4 is not a good one. b3, and then who's attacking who? I mean, it's completely winning position for white. How quickly it all falls apart for black. And black's logic to castle queenside was my king is safer there. What? No, literally the opposite. So white plays b3. Now black's in trouble. Black tries to desperately defend the queenside, right? Trying to play like knight. I mean, white, by the way, for good measure, you should, for white to successfully attack here, you have to open up with as many pawns as possible. Okay? If you have the option to attack a structure with a piece or with a pawn, right? Yeah, you should probably attack it with the pawn, okay? It's just one of these things. Like you gotta send in the small minions because they're worth less. You trade them off, right? You play a4, you play b3. But okay, knight a3, we have dc, and we have now white completely misplayed this. If you notice, the black wall of pawns is completely intact, and there's no way through them. You had to play a4, and in trading, actually you've activated black's queen and black's bishop. So now the advantage completely shifts back to black. This is why white had to play a4, because black activates the queen with this move, and now the bishop is also active. So you go back a couple of moves, the bishop was okay, but the queen was not. But now they're both looking real nice, and this is still looking very juicy. Okay, so white plays rook b1, right? Not a bad move. Black plays knight d5, also not a bad move. Attacking the c3 pawn, very weak, and queen a5 also possible. White defends it. Now, what I would do here personally is I would get rid of this rook, and what that does is now I can attack this knight, it can't move forward. Actually, what Stockfish recommends here is to sack the knight. That's how desperate Stockfish is, and black is still better. If white tries to play defense with a move like queen c1, now black goes knight f4 and the attack begins on white, right? But the attack has been totally slowed down. That actually happens. Rook d6 actually occurs, and takes, white gobbles a pawn, and totally misses the point. Just absolutely misses the point. I mean, everything is hanging. The attack was totally misplayed because white didn't involve enough pawns, which you should do. And, folks, when you have a position where there's something for free, you gotta really ask yourself if it's worth taking. because there's other things that can take you if you follow that logic. Can they take me? Can they attack me? And the other thing is, you're just opening the G file for the other person. Now, when the queen moves, the rook has a direct line of attack. The rook never had that line of attack. This pawn is not worth it. First of all, because you lose the knight and the pawn, but black takes. Black doesn't take the pawn, black takes the knight. Now we have queen f5, king b8, and knight h4. And the game's over. The game is absolutely over here because bishop takes h4. Black is cleaning up. 5 points up, -10 according to the computer. You say, Levy, I don't understand. Where's the drama? I've been watching for 15 minutes. Some people don't even make it this long. The average viewer retention on my channel is 50%, which says a lot about people's ADHD. Although, to be honest, I probably think I have it. G3, bishop f6 back, and white plays bishop g2. Now, what do you do in this position? Obviously, black can still play for mate, which, you know, means rook g8, etc. What black has to do here is two things. Number one, make sure you don't blunder anything. Number two, safeguard your king. When you are up a lot of material, the other person will get desperate and start throwing things at your king, if they're smart. If not, then I don't know. So what you gotta do, what I would play here, I would not even go forward. All right? I mean, I might like grab another pawn for good measure. You gotta be really sure this move, for example, is safe, because there's checks on your king and things like that. I would just go back to d6. Like, what are we doing? Just go back to d6. Just be safe, and then start taking stuff, so your king has more protection, right? But okay, black plays queen c3 and hangs the knight. Completely doesn't realize that this move actually threatens this. And a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction. They're like, oh my god, he took my knight. I gotta take. First of all, no, you don't. All right? This move removes the last layer of defense from your king. You're still completely winning if and only if you do this the right way. If you actually look at this position, there are no checks. Everything is covered. So there's no checks. You gotta just not freak out. All right? You gotta not do anything dumb. You maybe take on d4, for example. Don't do anything silly. You don't have to take back, though. Like, you could play rook d8 here, for example. Takes, king b7. Like, you're fine. At least this way you now have a rook involved as well. But okay. Queen d5, queen d4, queen c6. Okay, is there any check? No. What does this threaten? Queen a6. So, what I would do now is I would bring the queen all the way, like, back here and get the queens off the board. Because this move involves the sacrifice of a rook. That's not going to cut it. If the queen goes back to, I guess there is queen c4. I guess you cannot take because of this, but there's still no checks. So as long as there's no checks, you consolidate, you bring everybody, then you're going to win. You're going to trade rooks, trade queens, simplify it down. The problem is that black plays rook g8, and now absolute pandemonium, okay? That move threatens this pawn, right? And white defends, and now there's no checks, and this is the part of the game that people freak out. This is the part of the game where the person with black does not hit the pause button at any moment and continues to try to chip away here when what you should be doing is safeguarding your king and bringing more pieces because you have bishop e5 and now queen a6, and the defense of this pawn has been stripped, and this is very dangerous because here comes rook takes b5. Uh-oh, it's still -8, but Stockfish gives you the wrong impression. First of all, it's -8 if and only if you find one move here. This move threatens rook b5, but loses control of this diagonal. So now the move queen e4 wins the rook. And not only does it win the rook, it also guards the b pawn. So luckily you have a move where you can do that and then escape perpetual check and win the game. But queen a6, the last desperate attempt, what was black's last two moves were rook g8 and bishop e5, lining up something over here. Black never, ever, ever thought about moving the queen because they couldn't. Black couldn't move the queen here, so black just didn't move it again. Because they were like, oh, just this, there's nothing. And played bishop takes g3 and immediately blunders the game. Immediately blunders. Now, the craziest thing about this position is it's a draw, but black has to defend correctly. All right, and white has to play the best move. It's not rook b5, it's queen b5. Because if you move your king here, you get mated on b7. If you move your king to c8, it's a draw by repetition. No, it's actually not a draw by repetition, I'm sorry. First, you would take the bishop. So you actually are threatening to win the game. It's actually black who has to force a draw with, like, you know, rook g5 getting out, and then white would have to repeat moves. So queen b5 is actually correct. And then if you try to run out here, you lose. This is when bad things happen, all right? You can't run out to the middle like this. But white plays rook b5. So now white, trying to get both pieces involved, blunders, and king c7 is played, all right? We have rook b7 check, and now king c8, and queen a8. And that's it, the game is over. It's checkmate. It's checkmate. But it's not. It's not checkmate because you can't take. Because this is check. And it's mate in one. It's not mate in one for white. It's actually mate in one for black. Any king move gets mated. Every single king move, there is a mate. King f3, queen d3, king f1, queen d1, queen h1, queen d1, or queen e... No, not queen e4, queen d1. And, oh, you can't even go to h2. I apologize, because of the bishop. And the game ends, king f1, queen d1 mate. Checkmate in one. Now, normally what I do at the end of these videos is I just end them on a plot, on a cliffhanger. I just say something really dramatic, but look how close black came to losing this game. I mean, this is an insane move. Bishop back to b8, protecting against mate with a mate. That's insane. The pendulum swings like crazy. Avoid losing the base of your pawn chain near your king. You have to play defense and understand that when pieces move, things free up. This is why you always look for checks first. Don't get tunnel vision. And rook b5, I mean, white thought it was over. The fact that bishop b8 exists here is brutal. But it's checkmate in one. It's checkmate in one.